Welcome, everybody, to the Career Change Champions podcast. I'm your host, Tonya Montella, and today I have with me Shakera Jones. Shakera, how is this beautiful day treating you so far?
It is almost the weekend, so I have no complaints. I could complain, but it's not going to change anything. So I'm going to just go into this positive.
That's it. That's it. So Shakera Jones of Black Girls Dine Too, which is a lifestyle brand, blog, and social media space, serves as a guide to the wonderful world of high-end food and wine. Wine is one of the things that I love as well. So I'm looking forward to talking more about that. Her welcoming teaching style and warm personality, which if you haven't gathered it from just that second of her speaking, you're going to get more of that in just a moment. That's what allows people to learn about wine and cuisine, no matter their knowledge or experience. Shakera was named Wine Enthusiast 40 Under 40. She is the host of the podcast, A Glass for Every Palate. The list just goes on, and she is just as bubbly as the champagne she pops, y'all.
I'm blushing.
Now, we actually met their mutual friend and a former guest of the Career Change Champions podcast, Gary Bushrod. And when we were on his terrace in New York, one thing that I immediately noticed, I don't even know that it took a full minute to notice this, but was just how strong and bright your presence was. So I really can't wait for our listeners to hear from you today.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I try to be the light in the world that I want to see. Even people that work with me in my non-wine job might not be so accepting of that being true, but it is true. I do try to be as bright as I can.
Yes, it is needed for sure. We need more people like you. So speaking of the people you work with, on your Instagram, you also describe yourself as a healthcare IT professional, but with nearly 12,000 followers and your public figure status, I feel like we have so much to discuss. So I'm looking forward to understanding your journey and how you got into everything that I just described, but as well as your 9 to 5. So is healthcare IT what you do as your 9 to 5?
That is, I wish that it was only limited to 9 to 5. The future of healthcare does not permit for that. But yes, that's my primary job. I oversee clinical application security for Mount Sinai Health System, which includes 13 or 14 hospitals now across New York City. I love it. I get asked a lot if I would transition fully to food and wine. And I never say no to that, but I think I'm fortunate in that I get to pursue profession and passion at the same time. And I see that as a gift. So as long as I can do both, I will.
I love that. So what do you love about it? Because I'm sure when people think healthcare IT, they're looking to understand like your passion in it. Because for some people that may not be it, but I'm curious, what do you love so much about it?
I think as I've grown in my career, what I've learned most is how important it is sometimes in either conversations that we don't really think us as for anyone that is visually impaired. I'm a Black woman. I'm originally from Central America, but I don't think I truly recognize the value of us being in certain spaces. You know, tech is definitely not a field where you see a lot of Black women, but having been in the space now for some time, it is a career where I do wish to see many, many more of us because we have so many natural gifts and talents that are severely lacking in tech spaces that I just think that it's important. There have been a number of decisions and strategies that I've been a part of where I'm like, you know what, if there was no me in this room, this entire population, I mean, something as simple as, oh, we're going to push out a new mobile app and you're going to confirm your appointments this way. Well, that assumes that everybody has a cell phone, right? Where there are still families that are underserved, where there might be one smartphone across a family of 6. So it's just bringing those little nuances that still impact my community and people that look like me on a day-to-day basis that makes the work that I do, even when it's really stressful, it's still very, very rewarding to me.
I love that. And so obviously I'm interested in talking about, you know, your career path and how you got there, but so I'm bouncing around a little bit here, but I want to double down on what you just talked about in terms of representation of people like us. because, you know, Black Girls Dying Too just blatantly puts it out there. Is that something, because I'm less familiar with the food and wine industry, is that another place where we lack representation, would you say?
So literally that blog started. One of my best friends of many, many years, her and I, like we were Sex and the City girls. And so we were also in college, so we had no money. But as soon as we got jobs and stuff, like a part of our like, okay, we're adults now was always like going out to dinner. And it would be like the places that the Sex and the City women went to. So like the Balthazar and the Brasserie 8.5, and we're ordering Cosmos with no idea what the hell is in it and all that stuff. And as we started going to different restaurants, I can't say that I've had a dining experience, particularly not in New York, where I was treated differently because I was a Black woman. But it became jarring to me how many times I was in a dining room and the only other person that looked like me was a part of the staff. Mm-hmm. They were either the hostess or the host or a server or a busboy or things like that. And you know, the more I started to look for voices that looked like me, you know, writing reviews of restaurants. And I'm an old lady, so this is before Instagram and TikTok, where you can find out all about restaurants just by watching a quick 30-second video. There was just nothing there that showcased that anybody that looked like me, that we were eating in these types of places and exploring food this way, when for me, it was my norm. Like, this is what my girls and I did. Like, we were brunching before brunching was brunching.
Yeah.
And so I just started to document it and put, you know, my voice, my words, my background, and how I described and experienced these spaces. And that's how the blog was birthed.
I love it. I love it so much. Okay, so I had to tap into that while we were on that topic. So back to healthcare IT. Take me back to how you got in that field. And I don't know if that's kind of like your first big career move or if it led. So talk to me. I see your head moving.
I fell into this career purely accidentally. I have never studied healthcare in any classroom setting. My academic background is in economics and finance. I worked in banking. I absolutely hated it. And that was a turning point for me because it was the first time in my life that I realized, and this, I say this with the most humblest brag voice ever, but just because I was good at something didn't mean that's what I was intended to do, because I was good at a lot of things. But studying those disciplines and stuff, it was a clear career path, what you were going to do, right? That's why you were studying this. Whereas for me, I was studying it because one, I'm really, really good with numbers and I enjoy that. And two, from the first economics class I took, I realized that it was like this beautiful collision of psychology and like very quantitative things. And it still is a major that I recommend to a lot of people, especially if you don't know what you want to do. It gives you such a great balance of just perspective. And so I went on the path that I was supposed to, and I hated it. And I'm like, oh, all right, I don't want to do this. And my mom to this day still works at NYU and said, well, maybe you should get a job at the university and figure out what you want to go to grad school for, because then at least it'll be paid for that way. Like, okay, cool, that makes sense. And so I got a job in admissions, ironically.
Okay.
And it was really cool. You know, again, here was this opportunity for me to serve as representation. You know, I represented the School of Social Work and the School of Law at various points in my career. And it was always great to be able to be a familiar face. Funny enough, one of my best friends to this day is somebody, like, I remember reading her scholarship application for law school. Wow. And so when she showed up for her first day, I'm like, okay, I love you. We're the same age, but since we are here, and Brenda and I are still best of friends to this day. And then the university, I mean, NYU is massive, and they decided to take on a technology project to overhaul the student database. And so they pulled in people from the various admissions offices across the schools, because obviously that's the first data entry point for anyone into the school's system. And we worked in this very collaborative way on this technical roadmap of how we were going to do this. And I found myself being the point person for a lot of things. And a couple of the folks on the tech side were kind of like, you're really good at this. Because I come from a more quantitative background. I'm actually able to speak to tech people who aren't the best communicators with non-tech people. So I was able to kind of be a translator between those two worlds where I could speak to technical people in very nuanced terms and understand them and be able to translate that back to non-technical people. And I can also speak to non-technical people, understand what their actual needs are, and translate that to technical folks. So I absolutely loved doing that. And that took me, it ended up giving another career. That was kind of my first transition into IT, because I ended up being an assistant registrar at NYU and kind of continuing the university's path. At that, when I started it, it was at a single school level. When I ended my career at NYU, it was at a university level. Okay. And I loved doing that. And it was awesome and great. But I also realized that higher education does not pay a lot of money and I can make a lot more money doing the exact same thing in another industry. Yeah. And so a really close friend of mine worked in healthcare and he was moving to a different organization as well. And was like, I think you need to consider this. I think you'd be good at it. And of course, for me, I'm like, I don't know this stuff like that, a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like, yeah, it worked at NYU because I knew everybody. I don't know if I'm actually that good at this. Yeah. And so I took a chance and applied for a senior analyst position. And that was now almost 7 years ago. Couple promotions later, I did not fail miserably at it. And I'm doing quite well. So that's kind of my my roadmap into tech.
That is so interesting. So I'm curious. One thing you said made me curious about how much you attributed your ability to kind of translate from a techie speak to a non-techie and vice versa. How much would you attribute or not that to your degree in economics? How you said it's like a good starting point for anybody?
Yeah, I think that it's, economics normally, even in education, higher ed across the country, it's normally separated out into either an applied program or a theoretical program. I would not recommend you study economics theoretically. If that's what you want to do, just be an English major, unless you plan on going and getting like a research degree in it. But the program that I was in was extremely applied. And so to understand a lot of the content and a lot of the concepts, you needed to understand what incentivized people, what motivated people to make these choices. Mm-hmm. And you get into things like game theory and you start playing out like, okay, well, why would they do this? And so when it comes to talking to different groups, it's like, okay, this is what the end users want. Mm-hmm. But if they say this to the tech folks, they actually have no incentive to do this way. And they actually think they're smarter, so they won't do it. So you have to find something where you go, listen, I know you don't want to do this today, but if you do this today, you'll get their buy-in. So that next optimization, when you really want to make this work, this will go this way. Mm-hmm. And they go, okay. And then I can go back to the end user and go, okay, we're going to do this way. The only caveat is on the next iteration of it, you're going to need to be a little bit more flexible. We're going to have to hash this out, and everybody is happy. And so I think that understanding where to approach and how to identify what is incentivizing or motivating someone is a really, really useful skill to have across the board. And communication skills. I mean, that's the most valuable one. And that's the one I think I was born with. So I don't know, a little combination of both of them.
Yeah. Well, and as you're describing it, I'm hearing, because you mentioned the psychology aspect, I'm hearing that come through too. So that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's still a topic that's just interesting to me. I use it with my nieces and nephews, with my godchildren, like everybody isn't bribable with the same things, but you have to see, just a small example is my niece. She's extremely smart. So you have to incentivize her differently, because she knows that if you just give her something that's just task oriented, well, of course she can get it done with very little effort. So you have to incentivize her in very different ways, where she values not so much things, she values time. So if she wants to do something that's time-based, okay, you can use that as an incentive. If you just tell her, I'm going to buy you such and such, she's like, oh, all right. I mean, you were going to buy it anyway. So, you know what I mean? Like being able to identify those things that really drive people. And I think, you know, in a space like tech, where no matter what branch of it you're working in, you are constantly driving change, whether it's by innovation or playing catch up. It's change management over and over and over again. And it's almost always with groups that sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, but their goals are not aligned, you know? And so you have to be able to find those small points where it's like, no, here the worlds collide. So let's start here. Let's make everyone happy here. And then we'll branch out and figure out the rest.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because when you mention, you know, some of those skills that are just good to have no matter what you end up choosing as a career in terms of education and kind of a foundation being communications, but that being something you were born with, that's actually the opposite for me personally. Like
really?
Yes, when trying to figure out what my major was going to be, I actually started a psychology major. um, and then I realized, okay, if I'm going to like, what am I trying to do with this? And how much time am I going to have to be spending in school? Like, I'm not trying to live in school really for my adult years. So I pivoted to communication because I was like, well, yeah, I could do a business degree, whatever it is, but like something more general is what I was trying to go for. But I was such a shy girl that I was like, if I'm going to be successful at anything, I need to get this right. I need to get communications down because nothing's going to work for me. Yeah. So that's interesting. You said that.
Yeah. I was that kid that like, oh, it's the dance contest at the birthday party, center of it. Like, let's do it. I'm also from a very large family on both sides. So being quiet just isn't something that would work out well in my very large Caribbean family. So I think that a lot of it, but I've also always been like kind of outgoing and very much in my head, I'm an introverted extrovert, but all the world sees is the extrovert.
Yep. Okay. And then another thing you said, imposter syndrome, which everybody experiences at various points in their life, their career. You mentioned experiencing it, but still being able to take that leap of faith. And I'm curious if you can think back, I realize it was a while ago, how you overcame it or how you chose to simply take the leap despite those feelings that you had.
You know, I think imposter syndrome is very nuanced. So this is crazy that I just had this conversation with a friend the other day. So I remember I grew up here in New York. I went to private school and I remember like this constant idea that like, well, you need to be smart because you need to compete against the thems, right? And the thems were always around me. And the them was anyone that didn't look like me, right? And that was always where success was centered. Like, I think success was not centered around you being the best you could be. It was you be the best so that you can compete with these people, not even beat them, but be able to compete with them and not embarrass yourself in front of them. And high school, I thought was a joke. Like, okay. And then I got to college and I thought like, okay, like now I'm gonna jump into the lion's den. Like this is where like the super smartest of the smart people are. And I remember being in class like, okay, this is still a joke. Like there's still nobody. I mean, there were people that just had far superior math skills to me because they've been doing it a lot longer. But I think at that point, that was like phase one of like, this isn't real competition, right? There's no competition with solely based on me being Black with anybody. Like I can step in the arena and hold my own. Yep. And I think that ironically, going to a predominantly white institution was probably the best thing for me because it instantly removed any thoughts of inferiority complexes in that way because they just weren't impressive to me. Okay. But I did have some of the most amazing classmates that challenged me and helped me to grow intellectually. And so I think I did make the right choice in the school that I went to. I certainly don't think that it's the right place for everyone at all. And And then, you go out into the world, and now once you get into your career, it's not just a grade at the end of the class, right? Now you're getting performance reviews that are evaluating things that are both very objective and very subjective, right? And so you get your first taste of a back and forth with a colleague where you're wrong and I'm right, but you're able to use words to describe me that negate the fact that you're just wrong. Now the light is on me that I was aggressive, or I come off a bit intimidating, or, and then those things start to mess with you.
Yeah.
And certainly in the beginning of my career, I felt I could identify moments where I definitely dimmed my light just to take the attention off me for a minute. Like, I don't want this. I don't want to participate on any panels or anything outside of me just coming to work and doing the job that I'm paid to do. I don't want to kiki with anybody. I don't want any of that, because I feel like I had already seen that could be weaponized against you. So I think that that's actually the first point where, like, sort of a imposter shrinking syndrome started to kick in, like, as opposed to me confidently walking in a room like, I'm here, get into this greatness. I started tiptoeing into the room, and I was a student where in class, like, I'd come and sit in the front and introduce myself to the professor immediately. And I can notice, like, when it came to work, like, I kind of tried to just sit in the back and mellow in and not really, and that was my version of imposter syndrome a lot. And then you had people that were just intentionally diminishing, like when you had an idea working in these male dominated spaces, I can't count the amount of times where I said something, it was completely ignored. A man said the same thing right after me, and oh my God, great idea, let's run with it. And that happened a few times, but I have been fortunate in my career to work with a lot of men that truly worked as allies. Where I've been fortunate enough to work with men that have gone, that's not an original idea by me. That's actually exactly what Shakera said 15 minutes ago, and everyone in this room ignored her. And I think that moment kind of changed it, like, okay, so nothing's wrong with me. This is intentional. Let's just be us then. And that didn't happen until I was probably 35, 36 years old. Which was well into my career that I kind of got back to, like, you know what? I'm kind of great.
Yep.
Kind of know what I'm doing. So I'm gonna just be me here. And that was probably the most freeing time professionally, where I took risk. And if it didn't work out, it didn't. But I could stand on, that was an informed decision. I made a gut call. I see the errors in it. Let's circle back, without worrying, oh my God, I made a mistake. Now people are going to turn it on me. This is why there aren't a lot of Black women in here, because, you know what I mean? I pushed all that aside and was comfortable in making mistakes, and realized that everyone that had been mentoring me and that I had been learning from had made tons of mistakes.
Right.
And the only thing that separated that mistake being catastrophic to them and it being a point of growth was acknowledging it. Like, okay, well, this is how I looked at this situation. And now I see that I should have considered this, and this too. Okay. So the next time I'm faced with a decision like that, now my toolbox has a couple more things in there. And that, I think, was really essential to me as a professional, and something that, now that I actually am in a position to mentor people and help people navigate the earlier stages of their career, it's a moment that I try to facilitate a place where they have that moment much earlier than I did.
Yeah, because you saw how much it pivoted the way that you approached and showed up in work, right?
Yeah.
That's so interesting, because it's funny how you say you recently had an imposter syndrome discussion, because I fairly recently posted something about building confidence at work. And it's interesting that just the different ways that people approach it, or that it comes to fruition for people. Because the examples that I gave were true for me, but the example that I'm hearing from you is that what really made the change for you was having that allyship or that mentorship, to have people bring you back in front to where you were before, and show you that it's okay, and stop you from basically shrinking yourself and get back to the you that you actually are.
But you know what the most conflicting point of that for me is, like now, and particularly in the times that we're living in, all the people that did that for me were actually white men.
That's
all of them. And the people that have been most detrimental to my growth have been white women. Which puts us in an extremely, you know, in the world that we're living in now, particularly in these fields, you know, I can't lie and say, you know, that these have been the enemies or these have been the major obstacles to my growth. I've never had a white man weaponize their tears against me at work. I've actually never heard a man refer to me as intimidating or aggressive or assertive. I had a woman write that I was boorish in a performance review. I'm like, wow, I love that word. I would never use it to describe me because there's actually no positive spin on that word whatsoever. And so that's, you know, like where we are now, that's been tough to reconcile, because I think that the default is for people to seek mentorship from people that look like them because of that familiarity. Right. But as I've grown in my career, in my roles, kind of come to understand my leadership style and my work style a little bit better. I don't know that everybody should work for me. I don't know that every person's work style and learning style would actually maximize under working for someone like me. So I've continuously done that work. You know, when people approach me about mentorship or about working on a project with me or anything, I've been a little bit better at questioning out, like, I know that this sounds like what you want to do, but what are you motivated by? And that comes back to my major, right? Like, what's inside? Why do you want to do this? What makes you think that this is something that, because this is hard work and it's frustrating and sometimes it's not rewarding at all. So what's going to keep you at this? What's motivating you to want to do this? And if those things don't align, then it's never, I can't mentor you. It's, I don't think for what you're looking to do and where you want to go, I don't think I'm the person best suited to help you get there.
Yeah. And I think that, well, number one, it's so important to have that. But it's also so important for people to hear that, you know, that self-awareness, the importance of the self-awareness, the importance of understanding people's why in anything. I mean, it's come up in so many conversations that I've had, but in the particular context that you're sharing, it takes a different lens. And even to the point that you said about being open to different types of mentors, you know, I think typically people want to gravitate towards, like you said, people that are like them when they're at work, but being open to allyship or mentorship from somebody that's a little bit different that you may normally be closed off to based on past life experiences, whatever it may be. But just being open to that and open to the way that things might take shape as you allow folks to uplift your voice in a meeting, in a room where, you know, your voice may be stifled for whatever reason.
Yeah. And that's, you know, I think that those are some of the soft skills, you know, with your background in communication. I think particularly in tech, which is something that I keep at the center of what I do, is you can teach technical skills. They are teachable. The ability to teach those soft skills, right? About managing large groups of stakeholders that have very different vested interests. That stuff is really hard to teach. Yeah. So I am more inclined to take a chance on somebody that can hold their own in a panel interview with 7 very different people or 4 very different people. And at the end of it, if we're sitting and talking and the only negatives that we have are technical hard skills, well, then we should hire this person, because every one of those hard skills can be taught. The things that we all liked about this person can't be taught. And that's where I think for, you know, particularly for women and women of color, when it comes to tech, something as simple as the way job descriptions are written, you know, you write it where there's data out there saying if you list a bunch of bullets, women, not just Black women are inclined to go through it and seek out the things that they cannot do. Yeah. Whereas men, only need one thing that they can do to apply for that job and ask for an astronomical amount of money.
Yeah.
And so little things like that, again, as I've grown, not only in my day-to-day position, but just in things that I can influence, writing job descriptions. How is this going to appeal to someone else? You know what I mean? How is, like, literally there are things in cyber where I'm like, look, you need to put that post out and say, listen, Black women, when you think that guy is cheating on your girl, or you got some, how you guys become the FBI instantly, and within half an hour, the crew has figured out everything they need to know. That level of resourcefulness and finding truth is a critical skill in certain parts of tech. Please do not sell yourself short on your skills. It's little things like that, because there's no, even when we have open positions, people, we got to hire more women. We got to hire more Black. I'm like, did you see the resumes that you sent to us?
Yeah.
There are 2 women in this file. One is not Black. And both of them, when we met with them, this environment would not be conducive to their skill set, right? There are more people that are extremely smart, but they are more in a task role, right? So they're programmers, or they're data scientists that don't really have to interact with a lot of people. Their stuff is absolute.
Right.
They're not going to do well in the role that we're hiring for. And I don't like setting people up to fail. So just in all these things, like coming back to how I started with, it's amazing the rooms and decisions that I get to influence now that I didn't realize how valuable being a Black woman, or being a woman, or being Black in those spaces really matters.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And just the impact you're making. I mean, it's clear to me now why you love what you do. At face value, I was like, let me hear more about this, but now I get it.
I mean, my job is basically to say no to a lot of things.
Right. Okay. So we talked early on about how you started the blog. I mean, it seems like that just took off, and knowing that you've done that in addition to a 9-to-5, I like that, because you are, so one of the episodes before, I had my husband on, and we were talking about how, everybody says you should love what you do, but it doesn't always mean that you have to completely go all in on that thing that you do. You can do both. And you said it at the very beginning, almost precisely the way that he was describing it. And you're the epitome of that. You're doing both things that you're passionate about, but you're passionate about both for different reasons. So can you just help me to connect the dots between those 2 passions, and help me to understand how, going from your Sex in the City group, which I love that, that analogy, and starting a blog, and how that really took off into Wine Enthusiast, 40 Under 40, and public figure, and all these things you are.
Holy cow. Really, it's from me. Like, you should have never given me a camera sometimes, right? So, my social media following really took off after George Floyd, because what I was seeing, and I always think like it's a unique experience growing up in New York City the way I did, where I always had, a very mixed bag and motley crew of both interests and friends. And so, the whole George Floyd thing happened, and particularly in wine, which is an extremely white space. It is very much still dominated by older, wealthier white men, very, very much. But that's the industry itself. Now, when you get into social media, and this is seen across influencers and content creators and all that stuff, you have non-Black women that'll post a picture and get 8,000 likes. You have a Black woman that'll do it and get 50. And so brands, there's no effort, right? It's not incentivized to work with other people and all that stuff. And so when George Floyd happened, it was weird. Like, I started getting all these DMs from these women that, like, I don't know, or that I follow, and like, oh my gosh, Shakera, I'm so sorry, and I'm sure with you. And I'm like, okay, all right. And then that situation with Amy Cooper happened with the bird watcher in Central Park. And that just triggered me, because all of these non-Black people
Mm-hmm.
were going, oh my God, I can't believe this. I'm like, of course you can. You are friends with Amy. Amy has brunch with you. Amy works out with you. Amy goes to the same salon you do. You go to dinner with Amy and y'all sit next to a table of Black women. And when they have a boisterous laugh, Amy is the one at the table that goes, oh my God, they're so ghetto. And you guys go, oh my God, don't say that. But you don't check her on that behavior.
Right.
So I don't know why I got so aggravated at it, but I went on like an hour-long rant on Instagram, just gathering left and right. Like I got everybody together. I had white male friends that were part of the LGBTQ plus community. Like, okay, now because you guys have multi-million-dollar apartments in Chelsea, you're actually putting out there on social media, guys, no violence. This is not the answer. Like your own community didn't damn near tear down the West Village when people were not treating you like human beings simply because of who you were, right? Be careful which struggles you align with. And so I just had a moment where I turned on Instagram and I was like, I'm gonna talk to y'all for a minute. And I got everybody together. And literally overnight, I went from having like 800 followers to like 4,000 or 5,000.
Really?
It was nuts. And after that, like people started going through my Instagram and like seeing places that I had been or people that I know. And then it became like, oh, you're so pro-Black, but you're friends with them. They never invite Black people anywhere. And I'm like, wait a minute now.
Don't come for me.
Okay. Right. And it's like, well, I'm not justifying that because we all know that spaces can be segregated unintentionally, right? If you go, I go to a Black church, nothing is stopping white people from coming there.
Right.
But it ain't a bunch of white people in there on Sunday.
Right.
And so I think that spaces can be homogenous without it being intentionally uninvited. One of my favorite wine bars in the city is in the 50s. It's Aldo Sam Wine Bar. I used to go in there after work and sit and write. And Aldo is one of the most celebrated sommeliers in the world, really. And I would see him all the time. And one night he came in and this bar is dope. It's literally like someone's living room. The playlist is fire. Like you might hear Guy and Levert at the same time and hear Queen and like Kiss. Like it's great.
Really? I like that.
One night he came in and I was just observing. I sit at the same spot at the bar every time. And I just asked him, now, this is an older European man. And I just asked him, I'm like, how come there aren't more Black people in here? Because I don't have a filter a lot of times. And he turned beet red and was like, you should answer that question for me. You tell me why there aren't more Black. And that opened up a very interesting conversation because to me, I'm like, this space is dope.
Yeah.
But I also don't know that any of my friends or any of my people, not for any reason, they just hadn't been here.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought about that and that there's nothing uninviting about that space. I've never been treated poorly in that space, but they aren't here. Right. And so after that, like a lot of people started reaching out. People reached out for me to start. I like writing. And so I wrote a piece for 750 Daily about what allyship really means, because, you know, in the time of all of these like Black squares, or now all of a sudden you got a picture with a bunch of brown fists. But if I scroll down of all the influencers or anything that you've ever worked with, there's no reflection of, never mind Blackness, there's no reflection of anything other than this. And so, you know, I like talking and I've been in these spaces and I know these people, and I felt bad for a lot of people. Like, I don't believe in throwing out labels on people. Like some people are racist and need to be called racist, but I also think like there's space, like we have to give people a space to grow. Right. And so if you didn't understand or have conversations, you know, I talked about, I know a bunch of white people where I'm definitely the only Black person's number that they have, right? Yeah. But I also know a bunch of Black people that have no white people in their phone if it's not connected to work. And so, you know, that brought opportunities for writing and meeting other people. And then I went to a movie premiere where my hair caught on fire, long story, but it was like with the a lot of the very top people in wine, and it accidentally caught on fire. And I handled it with grace. We kept it
Of
together.
course.
And they approached me like, we need to work with you. Like, yeah, this needs to happen.
Mm.
And then they formed the SOM TV network. And, I became a partner on that and did documentaries and have 2 different shows on it. I've been in 2 movies. And now I'm on season 3 of my podcast with them and covering a lot of great stuff. And I mean, it was just kind of like, be prepared to fall ass backwards into success sometimes.
Yeah.
And funny enough, wine enthusiasts reached out. I was 39. So if it was any later, I would, well, they've since changed the list. So my class of 40 under 40 is the last class. Now it's just top 40, which is great because I do think that people hit their stride in their careers and actually get seen and notably recognized in their careers at different points. So there's no value now in acting like if you didn't do it before 40,
right.
Especially being 40 now, I'm like, I'm not even that old. I'm just started. And so that was really cool. And Wine Enthusiasts, since then has been really great partners and given me opportunities to, moderate panels and speak on panels. I'm heading out next month to California to speak on a couple panels, to Oregon to speak on a couple panels. And it's dope because, people will still go, well, now they're having you because now Black people matter. I'm like, that could be true. I'm also kind of good at this stuff.
Right. How about that?
I also kind of know a lot about food and wine, and that's something that I try to get other people to get to, like understand the position that women and Black people, like, yes, sometimes we're tokenized, but if it's mutually beneficial to you too, get your foot in there and then wreak havoc and turn shit upside down and do what you need to do. But sometimes maybe you are the token person. Maybe you are the first Black person that they're inviting. That's okay. If you know that they're full of crap and they're trying to use you, then you have your own standards. But we're not in a position to just go, no, you didn't ever want to work with us before. We're never going to do it. And then still complain that there's no us in this.
Exactly. Yep. No, exactly. Wow. Okay. See, I thought that I, had a grasp of like what you had going on. You just completely blew my mind at all the things you just shared. I just had no idea. And I'm just more amazed about you than I was before. And really I just really want to say kudos, like everything you're doing. I mean, literally from the impact and the work that you're doing on your 9 to 5 to everything you just talked about and traveling and all the things, like it's so much and it's so great. And as are you. So
thank you. Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have this great migration going on now with everybody quitting their job. I don't have Beyonce money. So quitting my actual job that pays my bills and gives me stability is not something that I'm going to recommend. But I do think that like more people, like you actually can do as much as you're willing to allocate time to do, like especially if your passion is something you do anyway, like leaving a hard day of work and going out to dinner was what I did anyway. So leaning into that and monetizing it was actually really natural. And so I think that it's important for people to, again, like look at life through a very focused lens and see where those parallels happen. If you're always the dope one dressed at work and you want to be a stylist or a fashion influencer, then start cataloging your outfit of the day every day. Like, you know what I mean? It's these little things that we see people making millions being influencers or whatever they're doing. And we think like, oh, I want to get to that one day. Well, they didn't start there. I started with 1 follower. The 1 follower was me. It really was. And so I just, I encourage people, like, just do it, like, and see what happens. You don't have to leave one to do the other, but if you got an idea and you pursue it, like, even if it takes you a long time and baby steps, like, don't let any dream or idea just rest in the back of your head. Like, go. Constantly.
Yeah, no, I love that so much. And like I said, you are the poster child for that message. So how can people follow you, connect with you, get in touch with you?
So you can follow me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Black Girls Dine 2 TOO. My website is blackgirlsdine2.com. On Twitter, I am Black Girls Dine 2, the number 2. I think that's what my TikTok is too. I can't remember because I'm not really good at TikTok. It takes too much effort out of me. And you can always email me. It's Shakera at blackgirlsdine2.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here. It was such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank
And
you for having me. This is great.